The gravy hit Amara's dress like a slap, brown and viscous, soaking into the bright yellow fabric she'd chosen to wear to meet Elliot's mother for the first time. Diane's hand still hovered over the table, the gravy boat tilted in her grip, her lips curled into a sneer that screamed she'd meant every drop. The diner's chatter died, forks froze midair, and every eye in the Atlanta soul food joint locked onto the scene. Amara froze too, her breath caught in her throat, but her dark eyes burned with a fire that could have melted the linoleum floor. Elliot, her boyfriend of 6 months, slammed his fist on the table, his voice a low growl. "Mom, what the hell?" Diane leaned back in her chair, her platinum blonde hair catching the diner's fluorescent glow, her face a mask of smug defiance. "Oh, don't act surprised, Elliot. You bring her here, to our family dinner, and expect me to play nice?" Her voice dripped venom, the word her sharp enough to cut glass. Amara's hands trembled, but she forced them still, pressing her palms flat against the table. She wouldn't give Diane the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here, not now, not after everything she and Elliot had fought for to be together. The diner, Mama's Kitchen, was supposed to be neutral ground, a place where fried chicken and collard greens could bridge the gap between Elliot's white, conservative family and Amara's world of poetry slams and late-night talks about justice. But Diane had turned it into a battlefield. 6 months ago, Amara had met Elliot at an open mic night in Midtown. She'd been on stage, her words weaving stories of her grandmother's hands braiding her hair, of growing up black in Georgia, of love that defied borders. Elliot, with his sketchbook and quiet intensity, had been in the crowd, his pencil pausing as her voice pulled him in. By the end of the night, they were sharing a coffee, laughing over their shared love of Nina Simone and arguing about whether Basquiat was overrated. It was the kind of connection that felt like fate, like the universe had conspired to bring them together. But Diane saw it differently. To her, Amara was an intruder, a threat to the pristine, white picket fence life she'd envisioned for her only son. Elliot had warned Amara about his mother's views, her casual racism, her obsession with keeping things proper. But Amara, ever the optimist, had believed she could win Diane over with charm and sincerity. She'd been wrong. "You're embarrassing yourself," Amara said, her voice steady despite the gravy dripping down her dress. She locked eyes with Diane, refusing to blink. "You think this will make me run? You don't know me." Diane's smile tightened, her fingers twitching around the gravy boat. "I know enough. You're not one of us. You'll never be." Elliot stood, his chair scraping against the floor. At 24, he was lanky but strong, his artist's hands clenched into fists. "Enough, Mom. You don't get to talk to her like that. Not now, not ever." The diner's other patrons were still watching, some whispering, others staring openly. An older black woman at the next table gave Amara a subtle nod, her eyes full of quiet strength. Amara clung to that look like a lifeline. She wasn't alone, not entirely. But the weight of Diane's hatred pressed down on her, heavy as the humid Georgia air. "Elliot, sit down," Diane snapped. "You're making a scene. This is about family, about our values. She doesn't belong here." "Values?" Elliot's voice rose, trembling with fury. "Your values are why Dad left. Your values are why I spent half my life hiding who I am. I'm done with it, Mom. I love her." The word love hung in the air, raw and electric. Amara's heart stuttered. They'd said it to each other before, late at night in whispered confessions, but hearing it here, in front of Diane, in front of the world, it felt like a revolution. She reached for his hand under the table, her fingers finding his, their grip a silent vow. Diane's face paled, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. For the first time, she looked unsteady, her armor of prejudice cracking. Amara saw it, the flicker of doubt in Diane's eyes, and something inside her shifted. This wasn't just about her and Elliot anymore. It was about every love that had been judged, every heart that had been told it didn't belong. She wouldn't let Diane win. "I'm not leaving," Amara said, her voice rising now, clear and unshaken. "Not this table, not this relationship, not this fight. You can pour all the gravy you want, Diane. It won't change who I am or what we have." The diner was silent, the air thick with tension. The older woman at the next table started clapping, slow and deliberate, and soon others joined in, a soft ripple of applause that felt like a rebellion. Diane's face flushed red, her hands shaking as she grabbed her purse and stood. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes darting between Elliot and Amara. "You'll see what happens when you choose her over your own blood." She stormed out, the bell above the diner's door jangling in her wake. Amara exhaled, her shoulders sagging as the adrenaline drained from her body. Elliot pulled her close, his arms a shelter against the storm that had just blown through. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know she'd go this far." Amara shook her head, her cheek pressed against his chest. "It's not your fault. But this is bigger than us now. She's not just fighting me. She's fighting everything we stand for." They sat back down, the gravy-stained tablecloth a reminder of the battle they'd just survived. The other diners returned to their meals, but the air felt different now, charged with something unspoken. Amara knew this was only the beginning. Diane's words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. And she was right. But Amara was ready to fight. For love, for justice, for a world where no one could tell her she didn't belong. Back at their tiny midtown apartment, Amara stood in front of the bathroom mirror, scrubbing at the gravy stain on her dress. The yellow fabric, once a symbol of her hope for the evening, was ruined, the brown splotch a stubborn reminder of Diane's cruelty. She scrubbed harder, her jaw tight, until Elliot's gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. "You'll tear it," he said softly, his reflection meeting hers in the mirror. His blue eyes were heavy with regret, his usual easy smile nowhere to be found. Amara dropped the sponge into the sink, her hands shaking. "It's not about the dress, Elliot. It's about her. She looked at me like I was nothing, like I was less than nothing." Elliot pulled her into his arms, his chin resting on her head. "You're everything. You know that, right? She's wrong. She's always been wrong." But Amara couldn't shake the image of Diane's sneer, the way her words had sliced through the air. She'd faced racism before, whispers in classrooms, sideways glances at coffee shops. But this was different. This was personal, a direct attack on the love she and Elliot had built. And it hurt more than she'd expected. They moved to the living room, curling up on their thrift store couch, the one they'd painted together in bright teal to make it their own. The walls were covered in Elliot's sketches, bold, abstract lines that captured the chaos of his mind, and Amara's poetry, pinned up in messy, handwritten scraps. This was their sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves without judgment. But tonight, Diane's presence lingered like a shadow. "I should have seen it coming," Elliot said, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. "She's always been like this. When I was a kid, she'd make comments about the neighbors, about anyone who didn't fit her idea of right. I thought maybe she'd change when she saw how much you mean to me." Amara sighed, tucking her legs under her. "People like Diane don't change overnight. She's not just prejudiced, she's scared. Scared of losing you, scared of a world that doesn't look like hers anymore." Elliot's jaw tightened. "She doesn't get to control me anymore. I'm not that kid who sat quietly while she spewed her garbage. I choose you, Amara. Every time." His words warmed her, but they couldn't erase the ache in her chest. She thought of her own family, her mom, who'd raised her and her brother alone in a small Savannah apartment, working double shifts as a nurse to keep them fed. Her mom had welcomed Elliot with open arms, cooking him jollof rice and teasing him about his terrible dancing. Why couldn't Diane do the same? The next morning, Amara woke to a text from her best friend, Lila, who'd heard about the diner incident through the grapevine. "Girl, you okay? That woman sounds like a nightmare." Amara smiled faintly, grateful for Lila's fierce loyalty. She typed back a quick reply, promising to call later, then turned to find Elliot already up, sketching at the kitchen table. He was working on a new piece, a swirl of colors that looked like a storm, blacks and reds bleeding into soft golds. "It's you," he said when he caught her looking. "Your strength, your fire. I started it last night after you fell asleep." Amara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe they could keep building their world together, untouched by Diane's hatred. But a part of her wondered how long they could keep fighting this battle. Diane wasn't just a person. She was a symbol of every obstacle they'd face, every whispered judgment, every door slammed in their faces. That afternoon, they decided to get out of the apartment, to reclaim the joy Diane had tried to steal. They went to Piedmont Park, where Atlanta's pulse beat loud and free. Kids running through sprinklers, couples picnicking under oak trees, a drag queen in a glittering dress handing out flyers for a show. Amara felt her shoulders relax, the weight of the previous night lifting slightly. She and Elliot walked hand in hand, their fingers intertwined, a quiet act of defiance. But the peace didn't last. As they sat on a bench, sharing a peach ice cream cone, Amara's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a post from Diane on social media, a public rant about family values and protecting what's ours. She didn't name Amara, but the subtext was clear. The post already had dozens of likes and comments, some from people Amara recognized, Elliot's extended family, old friends from his hometown. Elliot's face darkened as he read it over her shoulder. "She's trying to turn this into a war," he said, his voice low. "She's dragging everyone into it." Amara's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about a ruined dress anymore. Diane was rallying her allies, painting Amara as the enemy. She thought of the diner, the applause from strangers, the fleeting sense of solidarity. Would that be enough to face what was coming? "We need to talk to her," Amara said, her voice firm despite the fear creeping in. "Not to fight, but to make her see us. Really see us. If she's going to hate me, let her do it to my face, not behind a screen." Elliot hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "You sure? She's not going to listen." "Maybe not," Amara admitted. "But we can't let her control the narrative. We have to show her we're not going anywhere." They spent the rest of the day planning, talking through what they'd say, how they'd face Diane without letting her venom poison them. Amara felt a spark of hope, fragile but real. This was their love, their fight, and they'd face it together, no matter what. The meeting was set for Sunday dinner at Diane's house, a sprawling suburban home in Buckhead, all white columns and manicured lawns. Amara felt like she was walking into a lion's den as she and Elliot stepped out of their beat-up Honda, her heart pounding in her chest. She wore a deep blue dress this time, chosen deliberately. No bright colors to invite another attack, but bold enough to say she wasn't hiding. Diane greeted them at the door, her smile tight and insincere. "Elliot, sweetheart," she said, pulling him into a hug while barely glancing at Amara. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The house smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary, but the warmth was superficial. The dining room table was set with crisp white linens and polished silver, a stark contrast to the cozy chaos of Mama's kitchen. Diane's husband, Robert, was there too, a quiet man with graying hair who offered Amara a polite nod but said little. Amara wondered if he shared Diane's views or was just too tired to fight her. They sat, the tension thick enough to choke on. Diane served the food with exaggerated care, her movements precise, her eyes flicking to Amara every few seconds. Elliot's hand found Amara's under the table, a steady anchor in the storm. "So," Diane began, cutting into her chicken, "I saw your little poetry thing online, Amara. Quite passionate." The word was laced with condescension, as if Amara's art was a childish hobby. Amara forced a smile. Thank you. It's how I process the world. Poetry's always been my way of speaking truth. Diane's fork paused. Truth? That's a strong word. Truth is subjective, don't you think? Not when it comes to love. Elliot cut in, his voice sharp. Or respect. Those aren't up for debate, Mom. Diane's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned to Robert, who was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Robert, don't you think it's important to protect our family's legacy? Our traditions? Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Well, Diane, I think. Exactly. Diane interrupted, not letting him finish. Elliot, you've always been impulsive, but this relationship is a mistake. You're throwing away everything we've built for you. Amara's chest tightened, but she spoke before Elliot could. What's the mistake, Diane? That I'm black? That I'm not who you pictured for him? Or is it that I love him enough to sit here and take this? Diane's face flushed, her composure slipping. You don't understand. This isn't about you personally. It's about what's right for Elliot, for our family. Stop it. Elliot snapped, his voice echoing in the quiet room. You don't get to decide what's right for me. I'm not your property, and neither is my future. The argument escalated, voices rising, words cutting deeper. Diane accused Amara of seducing Elliot, of pulling him away from his roots. Amara fired back, her voice steady but fierce, recounting the history of her own family. Her grandmother's fight for civil rights, her mother's sacrifices, her own dreams of a world where love wasn't a battleground. Robert finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. Diane, you're wrong. Elliot's happy. Isn't that enough? Diane's eyes widened, betrayal flashing across her face. You're siding with her? I'm siding with our son, Robert said, his gaze steady. And with what's right. The room fell silent, the weight of Robert's words settling over them. Diane's hands trembled as she set down her fork, her armor cracking further. Amara felt a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. Diane stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and stormed out of the room. Elliot squeezed Amara's hand, his eyes full of gratitude and pain. Thank you, he whispered, for being here, for fighting. Amara nodded, her throat tight. We're not done yet. They left the house soon after, the dinner unfinished, the air heavy with unspoken truths. As they drove back to Midtown, Amara stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. She thought of her poetry, of the words she'd write about this night, words of fire and resilience, of love that refused to bend. But Diane's silence worried her. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Amara knew this fight was far from over, and the next move would be Diane's. The next week was a blur of small victories and looming dread. Amara threw herself into her poetry, performing at a local slam that drew a crowd of artists, activists, and dreamers. Her words about the diner incident, raw, unfiltered, brought the room to its feet, strangers wiping tears and clapping until their hands hurt. Elliot was there, sketching her from the back of the room, his pride in her a quiet strength. But Diane's shadow lingered. Her social media posts grew bolder, veiled attacks on outsiders who didn't belong. She'd started calling Elliot daily, leaving voicemails that swung between guilt-tripping and outright threats. You're breaking my heart, once said. You're choosing her over your own mother. Elliot stopped answering, but Amara could see the toll it took. He'd grown quieter, his sketches darker, the lines jagged and chaotic. She tried to keep him grounded, cooking him her mom's gumbo recipe, playing Nina Simone records late into the night. But the weight of Diane's hatred was heavy, and Amara felt it too. One evening, Lila came over, her energy a burst of sunlight in their dim apartment. Y'all need to fight fire with fire, she said, sipping a glass of sweet tea. Diane's out here trying to ruin you online. Why don't you tell your story? Not just your poetry, Amara, your love story. Amara hesitated. She'd always used her art to speak truth, but this felt riskier, more exposed. What if it backfired? What if Diane twisted it against them? Elliot, who'd been quiet, spoke up. Lila's right. We can't keep reacting to her. We need to take control, show the world who we are. Together, inspired, they decided to host an event, a night of art and poetry at a local gallery, a celebration of their love and the community that supported them. They spent days planning, inviting friends, artists, and even strangers who'd heard about the diner incident. Amara wrote a new poem, one that wove their story into a tapestry of hope and defiance. Elliot painted a massive canvas, a vibrant explosion of color that captured their journey, gravy stains and all. The night of the event, the gallery buzzed with energy. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Amara took the stage, her voice steady as she read her poem, each word a declaration of love and resilience. Elliot stood beside her, his painting unveiled behind them, a testament to their shared strength. But halfway through the night, Diane showed up. She stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. The crowd parted as she walked forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Amara's heart sank, but she refused to falter. She kept reading, her voice growing stronger, each word a shield. Diane stopped a few feet from the stage, her eyes locked on Elliot. "This is what you've chosen," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "This spectacle? Over your family." The crowd murmured, some reaching for their phones, others staring in shock. Elliot stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "This is my family, Mom. Amara, these people, they're my home. You could be too, if you'd let go of your hate." Diane's face twisted, but before she could respond, Lila stepped forward, her phone in hand. "You're on live stream, Diane. The world's watching. What do you want them to see?" The room went still. Diane froze, her eyes darting to the phones now pointed at her. For the first time, she looked small, her bravado crumbling under the weight of scrutiny. She turned and left without another word, the door slamming behind her. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Amara felt no triumph. She saw the pain in Elliot's eyes, the weight of losing his mother to her own prejudice. They finished the event, their love stronger for it, but the victory was bittersweet. Months passed, and Diane's silence was deafening. She stopped posting online, stopped calling. Elliot heard through his father that she'd retreated into herself, spending hours alone in her garden, her anger giving way to something quieter, something like regret. Amara and Elliot, meanwhile, grew stronger. They moved into a new apartment, one with a balcony where they could watch the Atlanta skyline at dusk. Amara's poetry was gaining traction, her words reaching audiences across the country. Elliot's art was selling, his paintings a testament to their shared journey. But the scars remained. Amara still flinched when she saw gravy boats, still felt Diane's eyes on her in quiet moments. Elliot carried the guilt of his mother's actions, even as he tried to let it go. They talked about it late at night, their voices soft, their hands intertwined. They were healing, but it was slow, deliberate work. One evening, as they sat on their balcony, a letter arrived. It was from Diane, her handwriting shaky but precise. Elliot opened it, his breath catching as he read aloud. "I was wrong," the letter began. "I let fear and ignorance blind me. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to change." The letter wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was a start. Diane wrote about attending a community meeting, about listening to stories from people she'd once dismissed. She didn't ask to see them, didn't demand reconciliation. She just asked for time. Amara cried as Elliot read, her heart torn between hope and caution. She wanted to believe Diane could change, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Change never was. They decided to invite her to dinner, not at Mama's kitchen, not at her house, but at their new apartment. A neutral space, a fresh start. When Diane arrived, She looked different, smaller, less certain. She brought a peach cobbler, a tentative offering, and sat quietly as Amara and Elliot shared stories of their lives, their love, their dreams. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful embrace. But there was a moment, fleeting but real, when Diane looked at Amara and smiled, not with pity or pretense, but with something like respect. It was enough for now. As Diane left, Amara stood at the door, watching her walk away. She thought of the diner, the gravy, the pain. She thought of the applause, the art, the love that had carried them through. And she knew, no matter what came next, they'd face it together. The room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now, one filled with possibility, with the promise of a better tomorrow.